Hello, I'm Rick Mullinax, and this is Burn After Reading. This episode is part two in my debate with Mary of True Crime is NY on the West Memphis Three case. And if you missed it, there was some drama that led to Mary bowing out of future recordings. Now, initially, I wasn't going to use unreleased recordings in our first conversation, but as I was editing this, I found it difficult and daunting to convey her point with my own words. So I decided it would be in the best interest of the video if I used her arguments with her own words. Sadly, she won't have the opportunity to counterpoint because she decided to no longer be a part of this collaboration, which is her right. But it is also my right to finish this debate. Now, I mentioned this in part one, and I'll mention it again. I ask you, the audience, do not attack Mary in the comment section. But let me go ahead and make a distinction. Don't attack her as a person. And what I mean by that, don't call her stupid. Don't call her an idiot. But you can attack her position if you want. Both our comments are subject to criticism. But let's not make it about bullying. This isn't about me or her. This is about the subject matter. Say her position sucks. Say my position sucks. But let's keep it grounded because I don't have any personal animosity towards her. And she doesn't have any towards me, I don't think. With that said, this episode begins with evidence against the West Memphis Three, starting with Jessie's confessions. I hope you find the episode informative. Okay, let's talk about Jessie's multiple confessions and what led up to them. On the night of June 3rd, 1993, after Jessie Misskelley's confession and arrest, 3 police officers went to the Misskelley home, secured the scene, and waited for a search team to arrive. While they waited, the officers sat and talked with Jessie Sr. and his girlfriend, Lee Rush. All 3 officers testified that Lee described recent crying fits by Jessie. So she lived in the trailer with Jessie and Jessie Jr. and his father. And leading up to his confession, she said that she would wake up to him hysterically crying and that it happened a number of times. When she would ask what was wrong, he said that his girlfriend was moving to Florida. Lee said that he was acting strange and she couldn't believe he would react this way because his girlfriend was moving. Detective Brian Ridge wrote a report about the events of June 3rd, 1993, describing the post-polygraph pre-tape recording sections of Jessie Misskelley's interrogation, and Ridge wrote, Jessie told of one occasion that he had gone to the scene of the murders and sat down on the ground and cried about what had happened. He had tears in his eyes at this time telling about the incident. I felt that this was a remorseful response about the occurrence and that he had more information than he had revealed up to this point. At about 2:20 p.m., Jessie told Inspector Gitchell that he was present at the time of the murders and began crying about what had happened. Jessie seemed to be sorry for what had happened and told that he had been there when the boys were first coming into the woods and where they were called by Damien to come over to where they were. At this time, the inspector and detective gave Jessie some time to compose himself and for them to compose themselves due to the emotional situation that had just began. They then prepared for the interrogation to be taped. So I think it's important to talk about Jessie's confession myths. The documentaries implied that Jessie was interrogated for 12 hours before confessing. That is a lie. Jessie arrived at the police station at 10 a.m. and confessed at 2:20 p.m. Only 2.5 hours of that time was spent in actual interrogation. Some, such as celebrities like Henry Rollins, told people that Jessie didn't have due process, which is another provable lie. Jessie's father consented for his son to talk to the police. He was questioned because he was a known friend of Damien Echols, who was a suspect in the murders. With additional written permission from his father, he was read his Miranda rights and given a polygraph exam, which he reportedly failed. At a pretrial suppression hearing on January 13th, 1994, the prosecution documented four occasions when Jesse had been read his Miranda rights, sometime in 1988, twice in late October 1992, and in March 1993. So Jesse was familiar with the process. The documentary's advocates, supporters, claim that Jesse was coerced into a confession and recanted immediately. And that is not true. Jesse Misskelley did not recant his confession after June 3rd, 1993. He continued telling his defense lawyers, Dan Stidham and Greg Crow, the same story he told police. In his Rule 37 testimony, Dan Stidham said that Jesse first declared his innocence around, I believe, September 21st or September 24th, 1993, 16 weeks after his original confession to the police. Now, he did write letters to his family that he was innocent, but I think Jesse didn't have the heart to tell his family the truth. That's a hard thing to have to tell your family versus telling authority. And he was in conflict. And only he knows why he told law enforcement and his own lawyers that he was guilty while telling his family that he was innocent. The false confession defense did not come about because Jesse Misskelley insisted his confession was forced or pressured. It came about because Dan Stidham took up the false confession concept at the urging of Damien Echols' defense team, in particular, their private investigator Ron Lax. He recommended a man named Dr. Richard O'Shea. He was an expert on brainwashing, police interrogations, and false confessions. That was when Dan Stidham changed course. At no time before did Dan Stidham think his client was lying. Jesse himself didn't get with the program until weeks later. So, does it make sense that the police can break Jesse down in a short period of time, but it has to take weeks for his lawyer to convince Jesse to do something that is in his own best interest? To me, it doesn't seem he's as suggestible as people claim. And after the false confession defense failed at trial, Jesse returned to his original truthful admission of guilt. On the day he was sentenced to life plus 40 years of the murders, in February 4th, 1994, he got into a police car and confessed to the officers all the way to prison. He did so again on February 8th to his lawyer Dan Stidham. Jesse confessed again on February 17th, 1994, but this time to the prosecutors. At the start of the confession, the prosecutors noted that Jesse had not been promised any deals for his testimony. His attorneys begged him not to give this confession, but he gave it anyway. Jesse made it clear he wanted something done about it. There's West Memphis Three supporters who seem to believe Dan Stidham's account that Jesse was kidnapped by the state and strong armed and told it was in his best interest to help them. This was not proven whatsoever. Jesse wanted to testify, and Dan Stidham refused to cooperate. At one point, Jesse got fed up with Stidham and only wanted to talk to Greg Crow. Simply put, Stidham made wild and fantastical claims that have no basis in reality. It is true Jesse's recorded statements contain numerous inaccuracies, details which contradicted the known facts of the case, and pro West Memphis 3 supporters claim that's proof of coercion, but the defense's own expert witness, Warren D. Holmes, who specialized in the field of police interrogation techniques, said that police did not do anything wrong in that regard. Holmes also said that he would have done the same things himself. Holmes' complaints were about the time and the ligatures. He argued those things were not immediately cleared up, but also in his testimony, he stated that when you are interviewing someone, you don't stop them to start cross examining them. The goal is to keep them talking. Then he later stated that, yes, they cleared up the time, but not the ligatures. But Jesse didn't mention what the kids were tied up with until the second statement anyway. Holmes said on the problems with time and the ligatures, he gave a few possible explanations. He could have been doped up or had a faulty memory. Jesse abused huffing gas, drinking alcohol, and smoking weed, which all can lead to memory deficits. So, once again, the defense's own experts said that that could account for any of these problems. He also mentioned other factors like the indication of relief after a confession. What did Jesse do after he admitted to the crime? He cried. Another indicator was that if a detective mentions something, the confessor will correct them. An example, Gitchell asked whose car were they in, then you can call that a leading suggestible question, right? But Jesse doesn't buy into this suggestion. Instead, he corrects Gitchell and told him they walked. Another example is when Detective Ridge asked if Stevie, Michael, and Christopher had been in the water with them before the crime occurred. Instead of agreeing with the question, um, he instead says that no, they were not in the water with the boys. So most importantly, Holmes said that 99% of the time there will be details that will be inconsistent, will be left out, and threads that don't connect. But 99% of the time in those cases, the defendant is guilty. Detectives made it known that they believed Jesse was intentionally lying about the time for his own reasons, maybe just to mess with them, or maybe to give himself an alibi, or just maybe his memory was messed up. Police and prosecutors didn't believe every word Jesse said on June 3rd, 1993, and said as such, but they believed his confession was honest on the fundamental issue that he, Jason, and Damien committed the murders. After his conviction, Jesse gave his own reasons for the discrepancies. Officer Moody, in his account of Misskelley on February 4th, 1994, in the police car confession, he reported Jesse said that he lied about the time of the crime and that saying it was brown rope instead of shoelaces to tie up the three boys was just a way to trick the police and see if they were lying. In his February 17th, 1994 recorded confession, Misskelley accounted this ruse again about the brown rope. He told prosecutor Brent Davis he made it up to get the police off track. Now, let's think about that. So, in one of Jesse's statements, he exposes himself without even realizing it. He said, "Well, after all this stuff happened that night, they had done it. I went home about noon." He said it happened at night, but he went home at noon. Night and noon are completely different, clearly. I don't need to convince anyone that noon is nowhere near that time. Either way you slice it, Jesse is either bad at knowing the time or he slipped up when he was trying to tell the police that he went home at noon while using the word that night. Jesse wanted to downplay his own role in the crime and blamed everything on Damien and Jason. He screwed up early in his first recorded statement when he admitted chasing down Michael Moore and preventing his escape. That act alone made him fully culpable in Michael's murder. But throughout his June 3rd, 1993 statements, he repeatedly downplayed his own responsibility compared to Damien and Jason by using, "and then I left." And that was one of his ways of doing that. In his February 1994 confessions, Misskelley admitted greater participation in the crimes, hitting the victims with sticks, helping pull out their shoelaces to tie them up. Anyone can argue that Jesse pointed in the wrong direction where he chased down Michael Moore, but it is clear now that Jesse lies to minimize his actions. And like I said, he has memory deficits. It's faulty. It's probably why such things like the anal rape discrepancy is a mystery. Jesse said that he saw Jason and Damien screwing the boys, and at one point he said Damien was screwing one of them. I don't mean to be vulgar, but up the ass and stuff. Jesse said the same thing in his February 4th, 1994 and February 17th, 1994 statements, but the autopsy did not show any signs of anal rape on the three victims, or at least not definitively. So, what really happened? Well, one possible explanation is that Jason and Damien took their pants off, made scurrying motions with their victims, but never actually achieved penetration, and grabbed the kids by the ears and perhaps not sticking their members in their mouths while still it's disgusting to do that by rubbing something in their face. I also I don't see any proof that they didn't do the oral thing. I really don't know where people are coming up that that didn't happen. I don't really know how you can show evidence of that. But I think the thing with the ears, I think, is pretty self-explanatory what they were trying to do. And remember, Jesse was drinking whiskey, and he's also trying to remember things with an intoxicated mind. And as we know, he's not very articulate with words, and he's trying to explain and fill in the gaps the best he can. Having said that, he correctly described details of the crime that had not been made public. The most telling detail, Jesse correctly identified which boy had been cut on his face, which was Stevie Branch, which boy had been cut on his groin or bottom, that was Christopher Byers, and which boy had not been cut at all, and that was Michael Moore. There were widespread rumors that one victim was sexually mutilated, but the breakdown of each victim's injuries had not been made public. In addition, in one of his confessions, he mentioned throwing a bottle of whiskey under an overpass bridge out of disgust. He said it was with him before, during, and after the crimes. The brand of whiskey was Evan Williams. And Dan Stidham stated that if he found the broken pieces of that bottle where Jesse said it would be, then he would believe his client. He, along with Inspector Gitchell and the prosecutors, went where Jesse indicated the broken pieces of the bottle would be. They found the broken pieces, and then they went to a liquor store. They were able to properly match it to the Evan Williams brand. Jesse also stated that Vicky Hutchinson bought him the bottle of whiskey on that day. She bought two bottles, one for his friend and one for Jesse. They asked Vicky, and she confirmed she did in fact buy him that brand of whiskey on the day of the murders. Like anyone, Jesse didn't want to go to prison, but he was having a hard time with what he had done. That's why he initially denied any involvement. Once he was caught, he wanted to limit his involvement. That's why he fudged details or perhaps remembered some things incorrectly and downplayed his role in the crime. This is quite common with criminal confessions, but I also think Jesse was angry with Damien and Jason after getting him involved. In the end, Jesse did not testify against Damien and Jesse due to the badgering of his attorney, Dan Stidham. I consider this the ultimate betrayal of a client by his own attorney in hopes of more publicity for himself. Dan Stidham put a lot of pressure on Jesse not to testify. Dan Stidham had Damien's lawyer, Val Price, and Jason's lawyer, Paul Ford, cross examine Jesse, and all three of them were hell bent that he not testify. It wasn't because they all knew he was lying. It was because they knew he was telling the truth, and his testimony would sink Damien and Jason's chance of an acquittal. So I'm sure you got a lot to say in counterpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it to you now to make your counterpoint.
Yeah. So according to what I researched and well, from what I find to be credible sources, Jesse was sent there a month later, and somebody that was at the scene of the crime, somebody working in the department, one of them said they admitted to slipping up about details coming out about the crime scene. So after a month goes by, Jesse already probably heard the details. He knew certain things just because of that. Because people were not as quiet as they had claimed to be, and like I said, they even had, somebody in the department had admitted that that he did talk to a person or two about that. And we all know how the game of telephone plays, and so on and so forth. And so I know that the interview, yeah, and his father said to Jesse, because Jesse originally apparently told his father, like, oh, I know something about, I think I saw this kid near the scene or something like that. He had a tip that he wanted to go talk to them about, which obviously the father then jumped on it because, they're poor. And he was like, okay, well, go. I want you to go. I'm giving, you permission to go. So, I mean, I guess they use that, like the father gave permission. Meanwhile, I believe the father should have been there, and an attorney. But at 9:45 to 10 a.m. the interview started. 11:30 a.m. they hooked him up to a polygraph test, which is definitely a load of garbage. It can't be used in a court of law. And there have been people who have passed the polygraph test even though they were guilty as sin, like Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. He passed with flying colors, even though he killed multiple women. So the polygraph test, that's out the window for me too. So 2:44 p.m. is apparently when Jesse initially made the first confession on tape. And then he said that before that whole confession was taped, they had rehearsed things with him to say it on tape. And that's what he said. And he said that they rehearsed it with him, and he said that they were yelling at him. And it sounds like to me that the read technique was kind of utilized in this. They saw a vulnerable person. I don't know if you ever watched my video of the read technique. I did on my channel. The read technique was created back in like 1950s by some guy named John Reed or something like that. What they do is they take advantage of vulnerable people like Jesse, great target, and they'll yell at them. They'll tell them that they saw them somewhere. They'll use all types of these aggressive techniques in order to get the person to confess to things that they didn't even do. And Jesse did say that he was never given food or water. And apparently, and like I said, Jesse mentioning the screwing of the boys, it was not proven. Apparently, he said that there was wild orgies in the woods that Jason and Damien would participate in, which was not ever proven to be true. And how come Jesse was never taken to the crime scene to corroborate this info? They went, but why didn't Jesse go there to corroborate the info? That should have been done. And apparently, he was asked 340 questions in total, and 12 of them were open ended, 211 of them were targeted just yes or no. And yes or no, open ended questions, that's like, if we're going to believe in the whole polygraph thing, that could be the reason as to why he failed the lie detector test, if we're going to believe that angle, because asking open-ended questions, like sometimes you need to ask something directly, especially if they're saying yes or no. So that's another reason, which I definitely found that to be like discredited. And like I said, there should have been somebody present there. The detectives, I'm sorry, detectives described the crime scene to Jesse when they were not recording. Only once Jesse was fed the info is when they started actually recording everything. And like I said, they had rehearsed prior to that, and I got that off a credible source. I do believe in the source that I got it off of, and Jesse said that as well. And first instance, Jesse was not correct about the crime scene out of several options. And the said we already went on the said victims being raped. So that past that, Gary Gitchell. Then even you could see this in one of the in one of the interrogations, that Gary Gitchell, he then starts to lead Jesse to say the groin area, because at first Jesse said, "Oh, the bottom," and Gary Gitchell was like, "Oh, you mean the groin area?" And he was like, "Yeah." So that's also kind of making those people that were interrogating him to seem questionable and shady. And like I said, just taking advantage of a vulnerable person with the read technique. And he Jesse also claimed that the boys were beaten with clothes on, despite there being no clothes even found on the boys. And if Jesse left once they started, quote unquote raping, how did he know about all the, smaller details? And like I said, the confession was given a month afterwards, so that by that time the whole town knew about the case. And I ultimately believe that Jesse really did go in there for the reward money. and that his father made him do it. And he kept telling he told his family the whole time he was innocent. And I know some people are going to say, well, of course he's not going to admit it to his father, but Jesse seemed to be intimidated by his father from what I had read. And I believe that family members ultimately do find out at the end, or in the beginning, that their kid is not guilty or not guilty, and parents will lie for their children on the stand. Jesse, yes, he did claim that he was running running after Michael, but he was running in the opposite direction. Then he claims he bought Michael back, but ultimately he was running in the opposite direction. So, and if you also like believe Jesse's reasoning for getting so much wrong early on, or lying about it, or him throwing it off, like I would like to know which confession it is that you do believe in, if you do believe that everything was kind of a lie, or or they were throwing him off. So I just want to know which confession you believe in personally. And in the Bible confession, while Jesse was recounting his day, why did, like I said before, why did he add in the fight at the trailer park when Connie Malden, she slapped Cody off of his bike and the police were called? He wasn't even aware that alibied himself. And Jesse also claimed that the boys, they were thrown in the water over their heads, but actually the water was 2 to 3 feet deep. And shouldn't he be able to remember the slightest detail? And also, when it comes to alcohol, I believe that it depends on how drunk he was. We don't know. Nobody did an alcohol test on him. The breathalyzer. I there's plenty of people who can remember everything with alcohol. Yeah, and then there's some people who don't remember. So that's really not a valid. I don't think that's really like a solid um stance in regards to that. And the on the way to him giving these confessions, the police officer actually told him, just blame it all on Jesse and Damien, and like save your own ass. And he's like, and then they'll cut you a deal, And at that point, Jesse had, uh, said so much crap. So he was kind of like stuck. So at that point, he was like, I should probably listen to this police officer. Um, because like I said, he was told on the way there, like just say it, just say you did it, and just throw Damien and Jason under the bus. And another thing was, mind I tell you, so okay, so Dan Stidham was brought in as a defense attorney by the state. He actually did believe that Jesse did it, but essentially he was working on a deal with the state for him to testify against Damien and Jason. So that's why it went on for many months, because once they got prosecuted, I guess that kind of like they were like, well, what the hell, Jesse ended up getting no deal cut for him, after confessing. And usually when people are apparently confessing, they are usually cut deals. But he wasn't. He got life without parole. So and so yeah, so and then Dan was interviewing him in a way that involved repeating the information he told the detectives, apparently. And Jesse thought that Dan was a police officer. Apparently, he thought that. Jesse, however, was telling his family he was innocent, but in front of authority, he would just go along with it. Yes, that's known. And the Dan Stidham was on record. He suspected. Okay, yeah. Jesse about the deal to testify against Damien and Jason. Dan Stidham is on the record saying he suspected the prosecution had word about this deal. So to get Jesse to testify. And Officer Moody in his notes say that Jesse said that Officer Callahan, but actually it was Dolhite, I believe is how it's pronounced, was lying
Mhm.
about seeing Jesse on the night of May 5th, because that was another thing that was thrown in there. And Jesse, he didn't even realize that he talked to Officer Dollarhite. He was over an hour away from, when the boys went missing, is something that I do believe in based off the resources that I researched. And Johnson said that Dollarhite committed perjury on the stand. So why would Jesse be putting himself an hour away from the scene at Highland Trailer Park at 6:30 p.m. if this was a supposed real confession? And there was no sign of a struggle, at all. I believe that these boys who didn't know these three other boys, they would have put up some sort of struggle. There was no defensive wounds really that they discovered. I don't know if I'm 100% right about that, but I recall there wasn't. And and the boys, what another thing was that the boys were, their clothes was taken off, I guess, and it was not ruined. It was taken off either very carefully, or the
They were
boys
turned
were.
inside out.
Hello.
They were turned inside out.
Yes, they were turned inside out. That's what it was. Sorry, I'm getting a
That's
little
all right.
dry here. There's just so many things that I have to try to remember. Yeah, they
That's all
were
right.
turned inside out. So I'm thinking, like, what? I mean, they were either taken off them with much care for some reason, and I don't see why those boys would have, carefully took off the clothes, or why they would even touch the clothes because that could leave DNA on it. And or they were told to take off the clothes on their own. And let me see something else I had in here. Boom, 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 boom. Several things. Sorry, I had another thing to go off about the confession. Like I said, so much to remember, and hopefully you remember the points that I did make, because I just threw a whole bunch of things at you as well.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a few I'll counter, but at least I'm going to try to remember to. But no, that's okay. You're making your point.
oh yes, thank you. Yeah, I asked you. I told you a bunch of couple little things, and then sometimes when I listen to you, I'm just like, it's just that big of a case with so many
Mhm.
different details, with so many different accounts of what happened, so many back and forth. So it's very hard to actually keep up with. And like I said, why wasn't it's like the biggest thing that does bother me is why wasn't he taken there to, corroborate the info? They should have done that. And like I said, I believe him when he said that he was rehearsed beforehand. He was given no food or water. His father should have been there. Instead, his father just gave permission, because all the father cared about was the reward money. Once he heard Jesse was like, Dad, yeah, I got a little tip that, I heard about. So I don't think he went there out of remorse, and he was, feeling so bad about killing these boys. I mean, there's just so many things that, and like the perjury on the stand, and, him being promised to get cut a deal, and then it didn't happen. He got life in prison. That's why he lied for months. That because he thought the whole time that, he had to keep going with this, because he thought he was going to get cut a deal. Because at that point it was too late for him to just go back and say that he was purely innocent. If he and so at that point he's like, well, at least let me get myself a deal cut. I was told by the officer in the patrol car, hey, just testify against them, and you'll get a deal cut, or they'll even maybe let you go. And what else was there? Yeah, I already went over the liquor thing with you. Um, Officer Rudy. Yeah, I think I covered all the points. I'm probably gonna do, like you said earlier, go back and hit myself over the head and be like, damn it, why didn't I just why didn't I mention that to him? But like I said, I have so many notes that I made about the confession. And like I said, I think the going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth
Mhm.
invalidates the confession. Um, and like I said, Jesse was a vulnerable target. I know I sound like a broken record, but yeah, there's a lot of problems with this confession overall.
Okay.
Confessions. And like I said, I really want to know which confession that you do believe in.
Okay. So let's see. Where are we going? One. I do not believe, and there is nothing to validate or substantiate that the police off the recording coached Jesse into what to say. Because I believe if that were to be the case, it would have been far more better the first time. So I don't believe that at all. Um, I also do not believe that Dolahite committed perjury. He's never been committed of perjury. So I
It
mean
was
that's a
on record.
no, he didn't commit perjury. What happened, what most likely happened is that people told Jesse about that event that happened that night, the day after or a couple days after. So he can say that, but he didn't commit perjury. So
Hmm.
no, no, no. Let's back up and let's get into what you're saying about Dolahite. Dan Stidham was the one who floated this accusation, and it's outright slanderous. There is no basis in fact for Stidham's claim of perjury. A claim isn't record for such a thing. If Dan Stidham, for Dan Stidham to suggest Deputy James Dolahite lied on the stand, that's both unethical and unprofessional. The jurors did not believe any of Jesse's witnesses at trial because they had placed him in multiple places at once. In Paradise Lost 3, Jesse stated he was hours away wrestling, and based on the factual evidence, we know that's not true. He doesn't lean on the trailer park alibi, which should be evidence of how weak that was. Other witnesses on his behalf, and those witnesses tried to cover for Jesse, and they were found not to be credible. John Fogelman did an excellent job summing up the many problems with the alibi testimony in his closing argument. And Dan Stidham argued his case representing Jesse, and his strategy was always just to throw shit on the wall, hoping something would stick, and it didn't. Let's get into some other things that you mentioned. There is nothing to indicate that Jesse Sr. forced his son to talk to police. The police wanted to talk to Jesse because they wanted to check the possibility of him being a witness to homicide, or if he overheard something from Damien or anyone concerning the homicide. There's no evidence that Jesse was coached by police to make a false confession. If that was the case, there wouldn't have been as many inaccuracies, such as the initial time frame of the murders and the rope and shoestring discrepancy. As far as the read technique being used, yeah, okay. But that is a far cry from coaching Jesse to lie and confess. I also think there's some arbitrary nitpicking going on. I don't understand how Jesse saying injuries occurred on Chris's bottom and then having it reaffirmed to the groin area as some sort of leading statement. We both agree that Jesse doesn't have the best verbal skills. He's not a literal genius, so it can't be chalked up to that. And you claim that Jesse was not given food or drink, and that's also factually not true. In the Jesse Misskelley timeline report, it stated that at 3:22 p.m. Jesse Jr. was offered food, which he declined, and was given 2 cigarettes. At 5:05 p.m., Jesse asked if he wanted any food, in which at that point he said yes, and at 6:15 p.m. Jesse was fed. So I don't know where you're getting this that he wasn't fed or wasn't allowed to have anything to drink. That's not true. And as for the clothes being carefully taken off, I don't see evidence that they were carefully taken off. I mean, why? Because they weren't shredded into pieces? I don't get it. The pants were found inside out, which would show some sort of forceful removal. As for the defense wounds, I don't believe the boys had much of a chance to defend themselves by bigger teens. There's also no evidence that Jesse thought his lawyers were cops. This was a claim later made by Dan Stidham, which has no basis in reality. And this was in the book Devil's Knot. Maura Leverett quoted Stidham saying that Jesse had no idea what a defense attorney was, which is laughable. He didn't understand the concept. To him, a lawyer was just a person who was part of the justice system. He thought Dan Stidham and Greg Crow were detectives. And I mean, it's an extraordinary claim with no evidence other than Stidham say so. But Maura Leverett presented it as truth, and pro West Memphis Three supporters, they still parrot that same thing to this very day. And you mentioned the direction where Jesse said he retrieved Michael as he tried to flee the woods, and how he pointed to the opposite direction of when it happened. I already covered that. We've already established Jesse isn't very smart. We established his abuse of huffing gas and drinking alcohol and how it can affect memory. It's a minute point to argue which direction Jesse pointed to. As you know, as far as which direction he chased down Michael, the fact is he said he did it, and it was further away from the two other boys. As for why Jesse recounted the police call when Connie slapped Aaron, the police call began around 6:30 on the day of the murders. There had been a similar call the day before, so I mean, it's most likely Jesse was confusing times, which he seems to do a lot. So take it for what it is. I think he's just kind of remembering things a little wrong. He's a little fuzzy. He gets confused. That doesn't mean he's not involved, but it does account for why these things aren't always accurate. And as for which confession I believe there were truths and mistruths in all of them, either deliberately or by faulty memory. I already made my case when I said Holmes stated that 99% of the time there will be details that will be inconsistent, will be left out, and threads that don't connect. But 99% of the time in those cases, the defendant is guilty. And so you brought up that someone fed Jesse Misskelley before he was interviewed by police information about particular wounds that were on the bodies. Um, and you said it was someone from Search and Rescue. And well, that person's name is Kevin Johnson. Kevin lived in Highland Trailer Park in Marion. He lived next door to Jesse. Kevin was a member of the Crittenden County Search and Rescue Squad. Kevin initially said that he told Jesse that one of the boys were beaten and castrated. Kevin said he didn't know where Jesse Misskelley was on May 5th. Kevin gave some information regarding the injuries to the children to Jesse, but no one else. And he said that he said it was in the papers. But here's the thing: Kevin didn't know which one or if all the boys had their genitals removed. He only had general information. If Jesse knew which one had their genitals removed, then he wouldn't have gotten that information from Kevin, because Kevin didn't know. And in conclusion, Kevin's testimony doesn't prove anything. Also, if Jesse had prior knowledge that they were tied up with shoelaces, which was also mentioned, then why didn't he use that in his confession, since it is believed that he got the genital mutilation from his friend, but not the other thing? Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Mm, okay. Well, the thing is, it's like a lot of the things that we're throwing at each
Mhm.
other, it's all speculation, or we think it happened, or we're trying to go by logic, you know. And like I said, the fact that they did not take him to the crime scene to corroborate this info. Why? That's kind of sketchy. That makes them look very sketchy to me. They should have did that. That should absolutely have been done. And Jesse said that he was being screamed at, and he was also told, like, yeah, we saw you at Terrell at a cult meeting. Like, he was fed so much information. And Jesse, he wanted to blah 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 blah. Yeah. So, oh, also Jesse said that he wanted to get out of there at one point, which made him just confess more, because apparently they showed him a picture of Christopher Byers' face. And he said that he just wanted to get the hell out of there. He didn't want to look at it, that he was like really
Mhm.
disturbed and like scared of the photo. Um, and like I said, he said that they kept okay, but because I'm assuming because he's not smart or bad memory, he frequently kept getting things wrong, even though they rehearsed it. So they rehearsed it several times before the tape was turned on, according to
Mhm.
research. And Jesse also confessed to never killing a dog and not even knowing what a cult was. And I'm sorry, I'm going to go off topic real quickly. This was something I forgot to mention earlier. Um, well, all in all, there was too many things off for it to be considered a credible confession and deeming him 100% guilty. I especially want to know why that he didn't go back, why it wasn't corroborated. So apparently on May 5th, he said he works until 5 p.m., but his employer said that no, I let him off at 12 noon. So Jesse apparently said he was at a wrestling match that evening. So after getting off work, he met with friends. The reason why he said that the murders were committed in the morning was because he did not want it to conflict with his alibi about working until dinner time. And there was proven to be he did have a friend in search and rescue, which was proven, that told him about, the bottom area being messed with. And he initially Damien and he initially, I believe, said something about Damien and Robert Birch, but he changed his mind later and replaced Robert with Jason, because he knew Jason carried knives around. So he thought, oh, okay, well, that'll make him look more believable. And he was actually babysitting that night, Stephanie Dollar's children, at 4 p.m. And then he went to the wrestling match at 7 p.m. And this was, like I said earlier, was verified by 5 people that testified. I don't believe that they were lying, or tried to commit perjury. And there was this one kid, like I said, who had he didn't owe Jesse a damn thing in the world. And he was a brand new kid that was at wrestling, that said, yeah, I saw that dude there. So yes, that was another thing I forgot to mention to you earlier, so I apologize about that. Like I said, there's going to be moments where we go back and we're like, "Oh wait, crap, we got to tell this side of the story." So that was something I did forget about. But yeah, like I just need to. They didn't take them there to corroborate the info, so that makes them look sketchy to me. So I'm gonna believe Jesse in when he says that they had him rehearse things. And like I said, at that point, it was so wild, and they had this uh, a slow kid fall into their lap, and they took advantage of it. They wanted to get the case going, and then they paved the way for Jesse, and Jesse thought he was going to get cut a deal. Jesse is not smart. He didn't make smart moves, obviously, when it came to this, but there's so many things wrong with the confession, so it's just not credible at all. So this being the big shooting gun for everybody, I just think is it's garbage.
Mhm.
That's just how I look at it. That's my thing. And apparently you said you don't know, or you never heard of the corroboration as to why Jesse wasn't taken there.
No, I said I'm not made aware if they actually
Oh,
did or not.
okay.
I'll assume that they did it. I don't think that's grounds for a mistrial or for innocence. But trying to remember some of the things that you said. So, for example, whether it's the groin area or the bottom area, again, we're all agreeing that this kid is not Shakespeare. But when we want to cherry pick what he should know, then like if he says bottom versus groin, all of a sudden he's supposed to say groin instead of bottom, even though that's the general area. So like for me, it's like
But
we're
remember, I said,
nitpicking.
I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Remember, I did say he had a friend in search and rescue. This was verified. You could look that up if you wanted to do deeper research, that told him about this beforehand, and it was
Well,
confirmed.
no, it wasn't confirmed. That the person you're speaking of, and I mentioned earlier, that was Kevin Johnson, and his testimony fell apart during cross
Yeah, I
examination.
mean, basically, what we're both going off of, we're just not agreeing with what, we researched, what each of us researched. You're basically you're agreeing with, what the people that found him guilty, would say. Well, there's no evidence of, Jesse being fed information prior to him. There's no evidence that the guy in the police car told him to make sure that he just lies, and then says, oh, you'll definitely get a plea deal out of this. It's all, I mean, it's just basically, all uh,
Mm.
it's
I would call it conjecture.
speculatory.
Yeah, I would call it conjecture. Yeah.
Yeah. But and let me see what else there was. Yeah, he got so many things wrong. Jesse was 2 feet 3. I think the only thing is like I said, if he left early because he was so disgusted, like how did he know about all those small details that happened later on that he's claiming?
Because he's becoming more forthright as we're going along. That to me, that's he's being more truthful. That's the way I see it. So, you know, and I also want to point before I forget because I don't want to miss this. So keep in mind, even when he failed that polygraph test, Jesse could have said, "Oh, you're trying to pin this on me. Well, either let me go, which is my right, or I need a lawyer." And he would have that right. And of course, I know Jesse, he just didn't have that kind of mental capability to make those decisions. I hear that all the time. But he could, but he didn't. He didn't do that, but he knew it because he knew his Miranda rights. And he was told his Miranda rights multiple times that day. He didn't need daddy there for him to say, you know what? I'm done. I'm done talking to you. Can I go? And if they go, no, you can't leave, we're going to detain you. Okay. I need a lawyer. I need you. I need to call my father. So they've never in any time ever said, like, and again, Jesse Sr. could have been there. There was nothing preventing Jesse Sr. from being there. Jesse just signed up and just said, whatever, have fun, because he's not thinking that his kid is a murderer. He's not thinking his kid is involved, and even at that point, the police didn't know. They just thought they were talking to someone who knew Damien may have been a part of this crazy little thing that was going on, and they wanted to see if he had any information that he could provide. I think
You don't think?
the police were
Oh,
shocked. The police were shocked when Damien, because they think he's going to be like, oh, he's going to give us information that of what Damien and Jason, well, not even Jason at that point, just Damien. Damien said something to him. He's going to give us information of things that Damien said. And now here we are, and Jason, as we further go along, Jesse's implicating himself into it.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, he is very dumb. I mean, just like I said, that the kid made a colossal mistake, and when we go with profiling, since we did that earlier, since the people that think the West Memphis is guilty. Okay, we could use the profiling against Damien and James and Jesse when it's needed, but we can't use the fact that Jesse really was slow as hell and that they could have easily manipulated him and used the read technique on him, and that they could have really they caught a vulnerable person that they could take advantage of, and yeah, and they did a good job at that.
and maybe they did use the re technique, but still, my contention with this is that not all murderers are Hannibal Lecter smart. Like, they're dumb. Otis O'Toole, dumbass. Like,
Yeah.
absolute dumbass. So, like, you do have dumbass killers, and so I mean, it's not the police's fault that he's stupid. Like, that's not their fault. And, yeah, they're trying to say, okay, Jesse, we're trying to understand this. You're telling us this isn't truthful, like such as the time and other little things. The police know that. And if that would have continued onward, they've been like, we don't know what this kid's unreliable. We cannot use this to arrest him, and we cannot use it to go arrest Damien and Jason. So, it's in their interest to make sure that, yes, this is going to hold up in court. And there's just a lot of as far as contradictory statements of saying, well, they're going to coach him to say the right things, but he's saying the wrong things, and that's going to work great for us in trial. And I think a lot of that is misinterpreted as in this is a kid who is minimizing his involvement. He was also drunk when it happened. So even when he wants to be as truthful as possible, some things are truthful, yes, some things aren't. But then there's also a gray, fuzzy area because he was drinking. And it was Jesse that said he was drunk. It wasn't the police that put that in his mouth. That was Jesse who said it. So, this is definitely an area where we're going to agree to disagree on it. I mean, No one's gonna. And I knew that, and I think you knew that too.
Yeah, of course, of
But
course. I mean, like, you are saying that wasn't said or done. I'm telling you that wasn't said or done. I do see that. I mean, like you said, well, according to what Jesse's saying, either he's lying or he's telling the truth. He said that they pressured him and they led him to say all the correct details. It was only recorded when it was convenient for them. And the and you don't agree with that. You're saying, well, where's the proof? And you're, I think you said you need to double check about the cooperation, or you said that it's not necessary for them to cooperate it. I think you kind of said something along those
no,
lines. Did
no,
you?
I didn't say that at all. I said I don't know if they took him
Okay.
to the crime scene.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not sure of. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I'm not sure. Do I think it is absolutely positively, like, is it a deal breaker of the case of innocence if they didn't do it? No, I don't believe that. Should they have done it? Yeah, I will concede if they didn't do it, they should have. I thought that they talked about saying, I thought there was a mention of saying, if we took you to the crime scene, can you walk us through it? Whether that was whether that actually happened or not, I don't know offhand. I
Uh,
don't. And I can only answer honestly. I don't want to make a story, or
oh
say that
yeah,
that it
absolutely.
happened. But yeah, so yeah, and see, there's still, like, with if there's the burden of proof of guilt, there also needs to be the burden of proof. If the cops did that, then there needs to be proof of that, and there's
Mhm.
not, and that becomes, well, this is what Jessie is saying far down the line, that they were mean to me, they were yelling at me, they were telling me to say this and that, and all of a sudden, wow, he has perfect memory all of a sudden.
But you think that you don't believe at all that the town of West Memphis wasn't leaked information? A lot of this was a humongous case in a small town, and a lot of people were talking about it. You don't think in that 1 month Jesse was able to compile some information from what happened?
There were
He got
general
some things
yeah.
wrong.
There were general things that were said, and one of it was mutilation of one of the kids, but they didn't say who it was. No one had that information. So, why there was general information of things that were going on, but until someone can provide evidence and proof 100% that these particulars were stated, and that Jesse had intimate knowledge of that before that, based on other people, but like the general, and what I need is, well, so and so said, it has to be proven. Like, was it in the newspaper? Is there a television segment that was saying those things? But a lot of it was a lot of general information, but there were certain things that people did not know.
I'm gonna be, and see, this is gonna be another thing that I believe that a lot of people that did know actual things about their innocence were not put on the stand, or because they did not want to get involved. There was people in in West Memphis already deemed these boys guilty, and but especially by the time the trial came, everybody hated them,
Right. But they weren't
and
tried in West Memphis, though. Both of them
well,
were not tried in West Memphis. They were
oh
tried,
yes, yes, I do know about that, but
yeah,
I do.
Corning and Jonesboro.
Right. But it's still, just because it wasn't done there, it doesn't mean that those people did not hear about it. It was a very big case. Like, there were things that, and they're emotional. These are, like I
Mhm.
said, these are not professional people, criminal profilers, blah blah blah. And like I said, the messy confessions, the alibi, because there's things in the confessions that was right, wrong, things that I'm telling you that I believe are true according to my research, and then things you're telling me that apparently was true. I'm telling you he was babysitting up until 7 p.m. You're saying no. There's just, and obviously me need to suspect this is gonna happen.
I want to kind of circle back because I know we're almost towards the, like, it's almost 7 o'clock. But so I want to briefly mention the satanic panic thing, and about the whole what town of West Memphis basically condemning these boys. And so first, it needs to be stated that It did not play a significant role in Jesse's trial. A jury member, Lloyd Champion, told the West Memphis Evening Times that it didn't play a role in the conviction. He said it didn't matter if it was an occult killing or not. What convicted Jesse was his confession and the vivid image of Michael Moore running in vain for his life. This was also reaffirmed by a female juror who didn't want to be named. And the jury considered the defense's argument about Jesse being slow and suggestible, but stated that Jesse offered his own account of chasing Michael Moore down without solicitation by police. The juror said that no one twisted his arm and made him say it. So the occult killing or not, it didn't play a role in the decision with the jurors. Also, in the same newspaper, the same day, spectators thought that the occult angle was overplayed in the murders of Stevie, Christopher, and Michael. And to me, that's evidence that not everyone was going through this hysteria of satanic panic or trying to condemn these three because of that whole angle. But it definitely works for an entertainment narrative. A Puritan Christian town falsely blames three teens of murders because they act and dress different, and that's just cinema. And sure, newspapers, they hyped up the crime with Satanism and the occult, but West Memphis didn't convict these three. Jesse's trial was in Corning, Arkansas. That was roughly a little under 2 hours away. Damien and Jason's trial was in Jonesboro, Arkansas, about an hour away. And this was done in order to give the defendants a better shot at seating a fair and unbiased juries. And all of those damning stories in the West Memphis papers, the jury never saw them. All those damning rumors, the jury's never heard them. So the jury was under 30 with very little religious influence, and not to mention that Jonesboro is a college town. So some of that narrative of the satanic panic, why I cannot say that some people didn't buy into that. And yeah, the news always wants to, interview selected certain people in regards to that. There's another argument to be made that not everyone felt the same.
Mhm. Oh, well, I understand that. Can we honestly say, yeah, every single person in West Memphis just went based off of that? No, but that's all you heard about. And like I said, we don't know how many people believed it, how many people didn't. And all in all, like I said, and I'm going to get into that whenever we
Mm,
meet next time, because there's still so much stuff to cover that I
right.
want to. Oh, my last question for you before we end our little well, I don't want to say it's a debate, our you're so kind enough to have me as your guest on here, which I really do appreciate. Is Do you believe in the Callahan files to be a credible source?
Well, yeah, that's where the case files are. That's where the court transcripts are, and some of those have audio to boot, as well as the case files of people that they interview. Um,
Well, that's
they
where I
have,
got my information from. I
yeah,
got,
yeah. Well, keep in mind that was started by both
well, and
people
other
who thought.
sources as well, and other places
Right.
too.
But it was started by people, like by a couple of people, one, who believed in their innocence and another who believed in their guilt. So I thought it was a great bipartisan effort of these people coming together and, getting these files and putting it online so that the public can see it. So yeah, the Callahan website, whether you're pro West Memphis Three, whether you believe in their guilt, it's a good source of information. Like I said, there's also the lab reports from whether it was during the trial, post trial with appeals, motions, all of that stuff. It's a fantastic it's a fantastic site to go to. So yes, I do believe that it is, as far as the information, they're providing the information for people to consume. You read it or you listen to it if it's audio, and you know you do your best to come up with an educated assessment.
Mhm. Oh, no, I understand. I was just wondering what you thought of that, because like I said, most of my research comes from there. So I'm trying to figure out how we're on such different pages. But that was just my last question for you. The main, I mean, my smoking gun, it's definitely gonna have to be saved for a different night. Like I said, all the stuff that you mentioned to me, I don't find it to be slam dunk, and you don't find the things I told you to be slam dunk. But we obviously have to talk about the case more,
Mhm.
because these were people, after all. People do play off emotions. People can be biased, people can be influenced, like you said, yeah, and God knows how many people were influenced by certain people about the satanic panic, or Damien being guilty. I mean, there's just so many factors that go into this case. I can't even get mad at the party that says that they're guilty, because like I said, it's so mixed up. Like, there's so much information, so many mix-ups, so many recantments, so many things that were not done, and so many things that were done. Some things that we speculate, that most people speculate that these boys fit perfectly into that narrative. Jesse was the perfect person to have in there. Let's milk it. Yeah, I'm not saying that they planned Jesse from the get-go. I'm just saying, they once they realized how stupid he is, they took that, because like I said, West Memphis, they were coming down on the police department. They wanted it solved. Like I said, rightfully so. Three boys were murdered, and it's terrible. But and I do believe that when the West Memphis case is discussed, that we should also always, try to remember the victims, because ultimately, at the end of the day, three boys lost their lives in horrific manners. They never got to grow up or anything like that. But on the other hand, people like me, I look at it as three boys were murdered, and I three boys had years of their lives taken away, and they're going to have this reputation for the rest of their lives. Even if they're exonerated, they're going to always have the name West Memphis 3 stuck to them. So like I said, so many aspects. But yes, we'll definitely save stuff for another evening. So we'll definitely go into a lot more information that we both have that we haven't went over the next time. But thank you so much for having me. I mean, like I said, I believe that we both had valid points based off of our research. Do we agree with each other? No, but that was expected. So
So that was the last recording that I had with Mary. The following are going to be arguments that I believe confirm Damien and Jason's guilt. Sadly, we won't be able to hear Mary's counterpoints to these arguments, at least not on this episode, but it is what it is. And with that said, let's get into it. Damien Echols knew facts about the case that were not public knowledge, so let's get into that. On May 10th, 4 days after the bodies were found, Detective Brian Ridge questioned Damien, asking him how he thought the three victims died. Damien stated that the boys probably died of mutilation. Some guy had cut the bodies up, heard that they were in the water. They may have drowned. He said at least one was cut up more than the others. Purpose of the killing may have been to scare someone. He believed that it was only one person for fear of squealing by another involved. And at the time Damien made that statement, there was no public knowledge that one of the children had been mutilated more severely than the others. Detective Brian Ridge testified that Damien said that he understood the victims had been mutilated, with one being cut up more than the others, and that they had drowned. And Detective Ridge testified that when Damien made the statement, the fact that Christopher Byers had been mutilated more than the other two victims was not known by the public. The jury could have reasonably concluded that Damien would have known this fact unless he were involved in some manner. Damien took the witness stand, and his testimony contained additional evidence of guilt. When asked about his statement that one victim was mutilated more than the others, he said that he learned the fact from newspaper accounts. His attorney showed him the newspaper articles about the murders. On cross examination, Damien admitted that the articles did not mention one victim being mutilated more than the others, and he admitted that he did not read such a fact in a newspaper. It's also important to know that Damien no longer denied guilt after he failed a polygraph test. So, and that happened on May 10th as well. Damien took the polygraph test and he failed it. And in the post test interview with Detective Bill Durham, Damien denied any involvement in this crime. After approximately 45 minutes, Detective Durham asked Damien what he was afraid of. Damien replied, the electric chair. He then said that he liked the hospital in Little Rock. He said he had been treated there for manic depression. After a short period of time, Damien ceased to deny his involvement, such as admission through absence of denial. And Damien then told Durham that he would tell him all about it if he would allow him to talk to his mother. And Detective Ridge brought his mother in to Durham's office to talk to him. After talking to his mother, Damien again denied being involved in the murders. After approximately 20 minutes, Detective Durham asked him, you're not going to tell anyone about this but your doctor, are you? And Damien replied, no. And then there's the softball girl's confession. Several tween girls claimed to have heard Damien Echols bragging about the murders at the local girls' softball game in late May. Donna Medford, mother of the three girls, first told her story to police on Monday, June 7th, 1993, 3 days after Damien, Jason, and Jessie were arraigned. Um, Multiple girls at the softball field gave their report, but only Christy Van Vickel, Jody Medford, and Donna Medford all testified at the Damien and Jason trial on March 9th, 1994. Damien admitted attending a girls' softball game, but denied saying anything about the murders while there. In recent years, Damien has changed that story. He now admits that he probably did brag about the killings at the softball park, but insists that he might have said it as a kind of joking around, and it would have been like a joke. And Jason Baldwin's 2008 habeas corpus petition elaborated on this, and it stated that, yeah, sure, Echols bragged about the killings at the softball park, but he was just joking. That was the argument, and those comments were taken out of context, according to the petition. So Damien lied on the stand. He said he never said it, and he called the girls liars. Um, but now all of a sudden he did say it, or he probably did say it, and if he did, it was just a joke. Well, that's perjury. And so we now have these indicators for guilt. He has no alibi. He thinks that he's smarter than the police, and he slipped up and gave a detail about how one kid was mutilated more than the others. He stopped denying guilt to Detective Bill Durham, and he bragged about murdering the boys at a softball game, and that was overheard by multiple witnesses. And there are other possible confessions that he made to some of his other friends, but they didn't testify, so we can't really talk about it. And interestingly enough, after the Alford plea in 2011, Damien's former trial lawyer, Val Price, would also have something interesting to say in an interview with the Commercial Appeal after his former client's release. And I'm going to quote this. Among bystanders outside the courthouse was Val Price, Echols' original defense attorney. As a testament to changed times, Price, who in 1994 defended the Mid South's most notorious teen murder defendant, said he's now a juvenile prosecutor. Watching the carnival atmosphere around him, he smiled and shook his head. The whole tenor of everything has changed quite a bit, he said. Asked if he believed Echols was indeed innocent, Price squinted his eyes, shook his head again, and said, it's hard to say. That's very interesting coming from his original trial lawyer, to say that he's not sure if his client is innocent. And let's not forget, Damien showed no empathy to the families in the courtroom. Instead, he reveled in their misery and he taunted them in court by licking his lips um, at them and also blowing kisses at them. And that takes a tremendous amount of mental gymnastics to explain everything that I just mentioned, just to explain it away that Damien's actions were just that of a simple punk who wanted attention. So, this is the part where I would ask Mary if she has anything she would like to add or if she would like to counterpoint what I just stated. But since she's not here, we're going to move on to Jason Baldwin's confession to Michael Carson. So in January 1994, 16-year-old Michael Carson contacted the Arkansas State Police with information. Michael and Jason had both been held at the Craighead County Detention Center in the summer of 1993, and Michael claimed that Jason confessed to him sometime in late July or early August. The reason to come forward was due to both Michael and his father watching it on TV, and Michael explained to his father that Jason confessed to him, and Michael's father pushed him to contact the police. Michael didn't want to get involved, but his father made it clear it was his responsibility to call the police and let them know what he knew and what he was told. And while in prison, Michael would come to Jason's aid when some other boy would pick on him. He basically said, if you have a problem with Jason, you have a problem with me. And this is what led to the two to talk. And Michael asked Jason twice if he committed the murders. The first time he said no, but he admitted it the second time. And they had about 2 minutes to talk. And Jason told him, "We sucked blood from a penis." He never used the word scrotum. He told Michael, "We played with the balls after they were out of the skin." Jason told him that he put the balls in his mouth. And Jason told Michael that Damien did this along with him. Other things that Jason said, he said that when he gets out, he's going to kick Jessie Misskelley's ass. Jason told Michael he's going to walk straight out of here. They don't have any evidence on him. His parents are going to throw him a big party. And look, I get it. Jailhouse snitch testimony is notoriously untrustworthy. I get it. Inmates have a huge incentive to make up stories and negotiate favors for their testimony. And there are prosecutors that are willing to use questionable testimony to gain convictions. However, there are good reasons to consider Michael Carson's testimony as believable. By the time he came forward, Michael had been released and faced no charges. He had nothing to gain from his testimony. I mean, he didn't even want to testify or be involved. And for what it's worth, he passed a polygraph, and take that for what it's, like I said, take it for what it's worth. And Danny Williams, an adolescent recovery counselor, provided court ordered treatment for Michael Carson later in 1993. And when he heard about Michael's statement to the police, Danny contacted prosecutors and defense lawyers. Danny claimed that he and Michael had discussed the child murder case, and that he believed that Michael was lying about Jason's jailhouse confession. And defense lawyers for Jason Baldwin considered calling Danny as a witness to impeach Michael Carson's testimony, but ultimately decided against it. Why? Because Danny said he would not be able to testify consistently with the things he's been telling them. And in October 1996, Jason Baldwin received a letter from Johnny Preston, a musician then incarcerated in Kentucky, who claimed that he had a homosexual fling with Michael in March or April of 1994. According to the letter, Michael was distraught over committing perjury at Jason's trial. It was a very bizarre letter. The Kentucky prisoner slash musician, Johnny Preston, apparently does not exist, but it's not clear if he really wrote this letter. Jason's mother presented the letter at an appeals hearing, and some online sleuths suspect that the letter was a forgery. But I don't know. And Michael Carson reaffirmed his story in December 1996, and he denied ever having met Johnny Preston. And he wrote, "That's just something somebody has made up. They're trying to make me look bad so Jason can get off. I don't go around crying about things in front of total strangers." And now let's get into the infamous West of Memphis Michael Carson interview. And What said isn't nearly as important as what wasn't said. He talked about being on serious drugs during the time of the Jason Baldwin Damien Echols trial, and he apologized to Jason. But the thing is, he didn't say that he made it up or he did not recant his confession. Now, keep in mind, money was being thrown around for participation. But again, Michael never recanted. And I challenge Amy Berg, Peter Jackson, or whoever has access to the raw film of that documentary, release the entire interview with Michael Carson. Show me where he recanted. I want to watch it, listen to it, whatever. But I want to hear that he recanted. I want to hear that he made it all up because that's not in there. And I think it's more probable that Michael just apologized to Jason for just getting involved. Not that what he said wasn't true, but for simply getting involved. Because again, remember, he didn't want to get involved to begin with. He told his dad the story, and his dad told him, you have to talk to the prosecutors and the police. You have to let them know what he told you. And that's what happened. All right, since Mary is not here to, give a counterpoint, let's move on to other evidence. Uh, the lake knife. So on November 17th, 1993, authorities eventually decided to search the portion of the lake that was nearest to Jason's trailer. They had a dive team down and to search. And after about an hour of searching, a diver popped back up with a survival knife in hand, which had been found submerged in the mud below. The knife was later determined to be consistent with the injuries on the bodies of the three children. It had, well, at least two of them, I should say. It had serrations on the back of it, which were like a saw blade, and under observation appeared to have been the weapon that made a series of unique cuts on the inner thighs of Chris Byers and left patterns of Stevie Branch as well. Initially, West Memphis Three supporters insisted that the lake knife was planted by the police or the prosecution. Uh, the West Memphis Three's own lawyers would try and insist this, claiming that the police knew there'd be some evidence there because, after all, they planted it. Then, years later, the defense would acknowledge that the knife likely belonged to Jason Baldwin, instead claiming that the prosecution knew it would be there because the knife was in the water a year before the murders. So we're getting changing stories. And a neighbor named Joseph Samuel Dwyer, who had been friends with Jason Baldwin, had stated that he had seen this knife in his possession, describing it as a Rambo knife. He also said that he had seen Jason's mother toss it in the water. But then there are some additional statements that describes the knife in detail and placed it in Jason's trailer around the time of the murders, further showing that the knife was the same one tossed in the lake and had not been done so a year before. So, anyways, Dennis Dink Dent, Jason's mother's boyfriend, had only lived with her for about a month and was kicked out of the house around Mother's Day, which was May 9th, 1993, after the murders. It was Dennis who told John Fogelman that he had seen the knife in the trailer before, offering a detailed description of it, only to then change his story and say that he had been told about the knife and had been discussing it with Jason's mom on how to help her out, help alibi her son. So the police found this knife that had been in Jason's trailer, and his mother had apparently concealed it in the water behind their home after an argument with Jason. Then her boyfriend describes seeing the knife, then immediately changes his story and says that he never saw it. So Jason claimed during his Rule 37 hearing that Dennis Dent had only lived with his family for about 1 to 2 months. So, if this knife was supposedly tossed in the water a year before, as claimed, how could Dent have seen it, and if he had only lived with Jason's mother for about 1 to 2 months at the time of the murders, like how is that possible? Yeah, he changed his story, but it's odd, and it's a data point. And let's talk about Jason's mom. Jason Baldwin's girlfriend suggested that he would have probably told his mother about the crimes if he had done them, and that she'd likely lie for him. Now, take it for whatever that is, but still. And there is evidence to suggest this, though. Jason's mom seemed to be willing to lie and was even willing to help her son dispose of key evidence. In statements to social media in 2013, Jason's mom suggested two news stories for how the knife ended up in the lake. In the first statement, she denied throwing it in, adding a new twist, saying that Jason disposed of the knife in the lake, but then adds that none of her children, including Jason, ever owned any knives. Well, we know that's a lie. Jason, however, we know for a fact, owned knives, several knives, in fact, and numerous witnesses testified as such, including his friend and accomplice, Jessie Misskelley. Jason's brother Matthew would link a knife and an ice axe to Jason, which he had traded away because he was afraid the police would try and use them to link him to the murders. Kind of odd, but all right. So Jason's mom, after making the admission on Facebook, said that Jason threw the knife in the lake, then quickly produced a second version of how the knife ended up in the lake, insisting that Officer Murray framed her son for the murders by planting the knife after she spurned him. In an interview with Truth and Justice and in the book Dark Spell, Jason admitted he owned the lake knife. So now we definitively know that yes, this was Jason's knife, and he accidentally threw it in the water after his mother threw out a knife that his younger brother Terry, I guess, accidentally cut himself. And so his statement was that if she is throwing out that knife, then they might as well throw out all the knives. He alleged that he didn't mean to throw it in the lake, but it just slipped out of his hands or his hand, and it ended up in the water. And Jason's brother Matthew would account a similar story, but it wasn't a year before, like Jason said in the interview. It was after the murders. Matthew verified this, and he said that his mom was getting rid of all their knives that they acquired from a trade. That trade was with Kenny and Billy Newell. Kenny confirmed this in a statement on May 11th, 1993. These stories all contradict each other. Jason states that his mother threw it in the water. His mother then says Jason threw it in the water. Then his mother changes the story and says that Officer Murray threw it in the water to try and frame Jason because he was romantically interested in her. So I think that kind of shows that Jason's mother would be willing to lie to him if you are, because those are two very distinct, different stories. And you can't explain that away. You can try to, you can use mental gymnastics to do it. But again, beyond reasonable doubt. And in all likelihood, the knife ended up in the lake sometime following the May 9th Mother's Day interview by police when Jason's mother came home to see the police questioning her son. And at that point, she broke up with her boyfriend, Dennis. Following this, in the days after, she and her son fought over a knife, which was tossed in the lake. And possibly on May 10th, Jason had his brother dispose of a knife and an ice axe by trading it to the Newell brothers. And Jason had multiple knives. Jesse believed Jason was using a buck knife for the murders, but again, he was drunk on whiskey, not very good with the memory. It's faulty. So it's hard to say if he's misremembering or if he's just trying to fill in the blanks as to what the knife looked like. The knife recovered is serrated, just like what would have been used on the boys. The knife was hidden as if whoever put it there, they were disposing evidence. Jesse knew Jason had the murder weapon, and the murder weapon was found hidden behind Jason's home. Jesse's description is wrong regarding the knife because he didn't use it. He didn't stab or mutilate anyone, and only Jason was using it according to Jesse. He was, however, aware that one was being used and who used it, and who had it. He knew the who, what, when, and where. The brunt of it is the description of what the knife looked like is insignificant in light of other details and circumstances in the case. In the end, the lake knife comes back to the West Memphis Three, and it has never been successfully explained away by the defense. The knife was also consistent with the injuries to Chris Byers and Stevie Branch and had serrated, and it was a serrated knife, and it was thought to be the one, to be one of the murder weapons in early theories by the investigators. And I know people are going to throw the whole animal, animals making those wounds and all that stuff, and we'll get into that later. But let's get into some other evidence. Let's talk about candle wax. Now, how possibly can candle wax be involved in this? Well, what appeared to be blue candle wax was found on a book of Damien's called Never on a Broomstick. It was in his bedroom, and also a small blue candle was also was found on a table in Dominique Tier's bedroom. Again, for those who may have forgotten, Dominique was Damien's girlfriend and um, his baby mama. So, why is this important? Because blue candle wax was found on the shirt of Stevie Branch. Now, I know it's not exactly DNA, but it's compelling. There were also fibers, uh, green fibers, microscopically similar to a shirt found in Damien's home, and red fibers similar with a bathrobe found in Jason Baldwin's home. Those were found on the victims. The defense retested the fibers back in 2012, and they claim they do not match. However, the people who retested the evidence were paid by the defense. The fibers have decayed over the years at that time, and they were in poor quality. And the original criminalist who explained them, they were dead, and they're not around to defend the attacks against her original findings. Anyways, that's going to do it for part two. I hope people learn something from this. And if anything, if it makes you want to do your own research, I think that's fantastic. I hope that you do. There will be a part three because there's other things that I wanted to cover in my argument, and I will. I'll probably use some sound bites of Mary, some things that she said, like if I remember correctly, she brought up that Damien and Jason were not friends with Jessie Misskelley. I'd like to get into that. Um, Also, whether the crime was committed in Robin Hood Hills or somewhere else, I would like to cover that too. I mean, there's so many other things, and I just want to complete it and finish it. And so that's it. Anyways, thank you all. If you watched it all the way to the end, I appreciate you. And whether you agree with me or not, I still appreciate it. Anyways, my name is Rick Mullinax. This is Burn After Reading, and I'll catch your ass down the road. Take care.